The studio lights burned hot as Jelly Roll settled into his chair, the familiar glow of daytime television reflecting off polished floors and glossy mugs. He cracked a joke about how strange it felt to be sitting somewhere he usually only watched from tour buses and hotel rooms, and the audience laughed on cue. For a moment, it felt easy. The band played a quick sting, Whoopi smiled, the panel nodded, and Jelly Roll relaxed into himself, shoulders dropping as if he'd been given permission to breathe. He talked about his music, about writing songs in motel rooms, about fans who told him his lyrics kept them alive on nights they didn't think they'd see morning. Applause rippled through the crowd, warm and reassuring. Then Joy Behar leaned forward. Her smile didn't vanish, but it sharpened, the way a conversation does when it turns from polite curiosity to pointed skepticism. She shifted the topic away from chart success and into accountability, redemption, and public influence. At first, Jelly Roll nodded, answering calmly, choosing his words carefully. He spoke about mistakes, about owning them, about how change wasn't a performance but a daily grind. The audience murmured approval, but Joy pressed harder. She referenced his past in blunt terms, framing it less as a journey and more as a permanent stain. The tone in the room changed, subtle but undeniable, like a storm building behind glass. Jelly Roll's smile thinned, his hands folded together, then unfolded, fingers tapping against his knee. He took a breath before responding, the kind of breath people take when they're trying to stay steady. "I'm not proud of who I was," he said, voice low but firm. "But I am proud I didn't stay there." Joy countered quickly, questioning whether people with histories like his should be elevated as voices of inspiration. A few audience members shifted uncomfortably. The laughter signs stayed dark. The exchange grew sharper. Jelly Roll felt the weight of years press against his chest, years of courtrooms, cells, funerals, and promises whispered into the dark when no one else believed he'd keep them. His eyes flicked briefly toward the crowd, scanning faces that suddenly felt very far away. When Joy suggested that redemption narratives were often excuses wrapped in applause, something inside him cracked. Not exploded, cracked. His voice rose, not in fury, but in pain stripped of its armor. "You don't get to decide who's redeemed," he said, each word deliberate, trembling at the edges. The studio went quiet in a way that felt physical, as if the air itself had stiffened. Cameras zoomed in, catching the moisture gathering in his eyes, the tension in his jaw. He spoke about prisons and rehab centers, about friends who didn't make it out, about standing over graves and wondering why he was the one still breathing. He talked about writing letters he never mailed and praying for strength he didn't think he deserved. The audience gasped softly, some nodding, some frozen. Joy fired back, unwavering, arguing that public platforms came with responsibility and scrutiny. Her voice stayed sharp, professional, unflinching. But the clash had already turned brutal, not because of volume, but because of truth colliding with judgment in real time. Jelly Roll's hands began to shake as he gestured, not wildly, but urgently, like he was trying to hold something together before it fell apart. "I'm not asking for a pass," he said. "I'm asking for honesty. People can change. I'm standing proof." The panel sat tense, unsure whether to intervene or let the moment run. Producers watched from behind the cameras, fingers hovering near switches that suddenly felt useless. Jelly Roll leaned forward now, eyes locked on Joy, not hostile but wounded. "There are kids watching this who think they're too broken to matter," he continued, voice cracking. "If you tell them their past disqualifies them forever, what do you think happens next?" The silence stretched. The audience didn't know whether to clap or stay still. Jelly Roll swallowed hard, his chest rising and falling faster now. Whatever had started as a routine interview had become something else entirely. A reckoning unfolding live, unscripted, and impossible to rewind. Jelly Roll stood up slowly, the chair scraping softly against the floor, a sound that echoed louder than it should have in the stunned quiet of the studio. It wasn't the sudden, explosive movement producers feared, it was deliberate, controlled, like someone standing at a courtroom podium rather than storming out of a fight. He pressed his palms briefly against the table, grounding himself, then looked around the set as if seeing it clearly for the first time. "I came here to talk about hope," he said, voice unsteady but strong, "not to be put on trial for surviving." Joy opened her mouth to respond, instinctively ready with a retort, but the words never landed. Jelly Roll kept going, his voice cracking now, emotion breaking through every carefully built wall. "I know what I did wrong. I've said it, I've paid for it, I'll probably be paying for it in some way for the rest of my life," he said, tapping his chest. But if growth doesn't count, if change doesn't matter, then what are we even telling people to fight for? The audience erupted into a confused mix of applause, gasps, and murmured disbelief. A producer's voice crackled faintly through someone's earpiece. The camera operators hesitated, unsure whether to cut wide or stay tight on Jelly Roll's face as tears finally spilled over. He wiped them away with the back of his hand, embarrassed but unashamed. There are men sitting in cells right now who found my music because they thought no one else spoke their language, he said. There are moms burying kids who lost their battle, wondering why nobody believed in them sooner. I won't sit here and pretend those people don't matter. Joy shifted in her seat, her expression caught somewhere between frustration and surprise. She tried to interject, but Jelly Roll gently shook his head. Let me finish, he said, not raising his voice, but commanding the moment. You don't have to like me. You don't have to forgive me. But don't tell the world that the worst thing you ever did is the only thing you'll ever be. He reached up and unclipped the microphone from his shirt, the small click ringing sharply in the silence. That sound, so final, so unmistakable, sent a ripple through the studio. Whoopi glanced toward the producers. Sunny stared down at the table. Alyssa looked toward the audience, eyes wide. No one moved to stop him. Jelly Roll placed the mic carefully on the table, as if it were something fragile. I hope somebody watching hears this and decides to stay, he said softly. That's all I ever wanted. Then he stepped back, nodded once to the panel, not a challenge, not an apology, just acknowledgement, and turned toward the exit. As he walked off set, the applause grew louder, less hesitant now, fueled by emotion rather than cues. Some audience members stood, others wiped their eyes. The camera lingered on Joy, whose confident posture had stiffened. She stared ahead, lips pressed together, absorbing the weight of what had just unfolded. For a brief moment, the show had lost its rhythm, its guardrails, its rehearsed certainty. The host attempted to regain control, offering a careful transition, but the words felt thin against the gravity hanging in the air. Producers cut to a commercial earlier than planned. Backstage, Jelly Roll leaned against a wall, head bowed, breathing hard, surrounded by stunned staffers who didn't quite know whether to thank him or escort him out. He waved them off gently, asking only for a moment. By the time the episode aired fully, the internet was already on fire. Clips spread within minutes, Jelly Roll standing, his voice breaking, the mic hitting the table. Fans called it brave, critics called it reckless, commentators argued about accountability, redemption, and whether daytime television was the place for such raw truth. Hashtags exploded, think pieces followed before the hour was over. But beyond the noise, something quieter happened too. Messages poured in from people who recognized themselves in his words, people who had stumbled, fallen, and clawed their way back inch by inch. They didn't argue about who won the clash. They talked about what it meant to be seen. And long after the studio lights dimmed and the chairs were reset for the next episode, one thing lingered in the collective memory, a moment that couldn't be edited, softened, or laughed away. A moment when pain met judgment live on air, and refused to back down.